The trunk of the human body can be subdivided into regional spaces, which we are going to refer to as cavities. And there are two major cavities within this region. There's going to be a thoracic cavity located within the thoracic region of our body, and then more inferiorly located, an abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, each of these cavities can be further subdivided into different regions within that cavity. For example, within the thoracic cavity, we can further subdivide this into a centrally located mediastinum, or a mediastinal cavity, and a more laterally located pleural cavity to either side. Within the centrally located mediastinum, we're going to find the heart as the dominant content. However, we're also going to be able to subdivide this into smaller component pieces, which would include structures like the great vessels, the esophagus, and the trachea. So some of the structures that will need to come into the thorax will pass through an area known as the thoracic inlet or aperture. So this is how structures could get from our head and neck or upper limbs in and out of the thoracic cavity. The laterally located pleural cavities are predominantly going to contain the lungs. So our right pleural cavity would have the right lung, while the left would have the left lung. We're also going to have, again, the airways coming in and out for gas exchange, and the blood vessels in this region as well. So the dominant feature is the lungs, but we're still going to have some other structures within the pleural cavities. The thoracic cavity is going to be located superior to the abdominal pelvic cavity, and the separation point between these is going to be the diaphragm. Now, in order for structures to pass through the diaphragm, there are specific openings where these structures will pass from the thoracic to the abdominal cavity. The more inferiorly located abdominal pelvic cavity can also be further subdivided into an abdominal cavity, which is more superiorly located, and a pelvic cavity, which would be more inferiorly located. The abdominal cavity is predominantly going to hold the organs of digestion. So here we can see the major digestive organs, but also it's going to contain some of the accessory organs of digestion. The pelvic cavity, on the other hand, is going to contain some of the urogenital structures, like the bladder and some of the internal reproductive organs. So in the male, the prostate gland and seminal vesicles, while in the female, this would be the uterus and the vagina. We're also going to have the distal or terminal ends of the digestive tract located down within the pelvis, so the rectum and the anus. Now, the pelvic cavity is going to be bounded inferiorly by the muscles of the pelvic diaphragm. So you can see that without these muscles, there's just going to be a large opening positioned inferiorly. So these are going to not only help provide resistance, but they're going to help support some of the contents within the pelvic cavity. The superior boundary of the pelvic cavity and what's going to separate it from the abdominal cavity is known as the pelvic brim or the pelvic inlet. And this is a solid ring of skeletal tissue or bones that are going to surround this barrier. So we're going to have a very distinct ring separating the abdominal and pelvic cavities, but it is not going to block off the passage so that the structures from the abdomen can enter or leave the pelvic cavity.